Chapter 1. The First Night. Into the Catacombs. The sky was a shredded canvas of screaming colors. Azure bled into viridian, torn apart by streaks of crimson lightning that crackled like breaking bones. The very air was wrong, slick, thick, as though one breathed through warm mucus. Trees bent against no wind, twitching unnaturally as if listening. And the village of Dreckenthal, once a sleepy border hamlet nestled at the edge of the Reichwald, was now a dismembered carcass of warped buildings and eyeless corpses. Reality storms, the scholars called them. Tears in the firmament, portals that should not be, demonic winds curling from the realm of chaos like invasive tendrils into the mortal world. The survivors staggered beneath the writhing heavens, wrapped in wet cloaks and whispered prayers. They were 10 souls, none friends, none trusting, drawn together by desperation alone. Mercenaries, scholars, hedge witches, smugglers, even a rat catcher and a mute child wrapped in silks. Warped by circumstance, hunted by madness. Their feet found cracked stone steps hidden beneath the broken shrine of Sigmar. A tunnel gaped below, jagged and yawning, like a rotted mouth. The last vestige of Krellspire Monastery's foundations, buried when the great tower collapsed a century before. "Down there," rasped Laska, the knife-thin woman in the plague doctor's mask. Her voice echoed through the copper snout, distorting into something mechanical. "It's old, dry, buried deep. We can hide there." Nobody argued. Reason had died, long before this journey. The catacombs swallowed them one by one, torchlight flickering as they descended. Rotted saints, half-carved in blackened stone, lined the walls. Eyes weeping dark ichor, fingers missing, names erased. The deeper they went, the quieter the howling above became, though the silence here was no comfort. It was dense, watching, breathing. The first chamber was a vault of bones. Ossuaries stacked high into domed arches, mortar replaced with skulls and ribs. A broken altar sat beneath a fresco of Sigmar, casting down a 2-headed serpent. The paint had bubbled and peeled, leaving his face a blank, eyeless smear. The survivors collapsed against the cold walls, letting steam rise from their cloaks, hands trembling as though gripped by fever. "We shouldn't speak," muttered Jordan, a gaunt man in tattered priest robes. "Not loudly. It hears stories. It learns from words." "Then you'll go mad in silence," snapped Bertha, a pike-wielding Kislevite with more scars than flesh. Better madness with voice than madness alone. The child, whom no one dared name, whispered nonsense in her sleep, a soft, rhythmic chant. None could remember her ever not whispering. And then came the banging, low, rhythmic, distant, like fists on a door that didn't exist. It came from the walls, the bones, the very ceiling. "That's just the storm," Laska's voice again, too calm. "Time fractures, sound echoes. It bleeds in from tomorrow." It was then that the old man spoke. Brogar, a disheveled alchemist with more burns than teeth, knelt near the altar and placed a tarnished coin on its surface. "We will die here," he said, not with fear but certainty, "unless we distract it." He looked around the circle of exhausted faces. Old Crespar had monks who fought madness by telling stories, not prayers, not chants, tales. They'd share parables, fables, confessions. Madness can't nest in a mind that's always moving. If we speak each night, we might survive the pull. Murmurs of disagreement rose, some frightened, some scoffing. "A distraction for the mind," he added. "A circle of lies to ward off the truth." They agreed, reluctantly, if only for something to do as the world outside turned inside out. The torchlight flickered suddenly, then grew dim. Shadows lengthened across the floor and something scratched behind the walls. A slow, deliberate scrape, like claws across glass. Then silence again. "We'll tell 2 tales a night," said Bertha, sharpening her blade as she spoke. "True or false, doesn't matter, but make it worth listening." "I'll go first," said Brugar, eyes bloodshot and gleaming. "I know a story about a scroll that writes futures, and what it did to the city that read it." No one spoke. They just listened as the alchemist began to speak. Above, the sky howled and the stars wept blue flame. Chapter 2. Tale of the Beggar and the Spell Mirror. Once, in the crumbling city of Talmir, where the towers leaned like drunken giants and alleyways twisted into impossible geometries, there lived a beggar named Rask. He was a worm of a man, bent-backed and scab-skinned, his breath reeking of rot and lies. His eyes were bright, though, too bright, like lanterns flickering over wet stone, always watching. Rask survived by flattery and filth. He could mimic a dying nobleman's voice or imitate the lisp of a priest to steal a crust of bread. But Talmir was unkind to the weak, and every alley had fangs. Rask had been whipped, stabbed, pissed on by gutter children, and burned with candle wax by masked cultists who thought him amusing. He endured it all because he watched, and one night he saw something no beggar should see. On the 7th dusk of the cloven moon, Rask followed a procession of hooded women to the old glassmaker's shop. Long abandoned, windows bricked and doors sealed with waxen runes. The women entered through shadows that bent like curtains, but Rask crawled through the gutter and into the basement, silent as mildew. She was there, the sorceress. They called her Vailitha, a weaver of glamour and mother of illusions. Her face changed every hour, never the same, sometimes male, sometimes eyeless, sometimes both, but always beautiful. In the center of her sanctum stood her treasure, a mirror unlike any other, oval, framed in bone and polished bronze. It didn't reflect, but interpreted. When you looked into it, it showed not what was, but what you wished to be. With a whispered word, that wish became the illusion. Rask saw her use it once, on a merchant who had offended her. She made the man believe he was a dog, and he gnawed off his own fingers in ecstasy before dying. Rask knew he must have it. He waited 3 days, drinking sewage and biting rats to stay fed. When the cult left, when the moon bled blue and the wind stank of dead roses, he slipped into her sanctum. She was asleep or in trance, her body hovering inches above the floor, limbs twisted backward, eyes open and unblinking. A toad croaked where her heart should have beat. Rask stole the mirror, careful as a rat among bones. The moment he touched it, his thoughts rippled. The mirror pulsed, warm and sticky, like flesh. Whispers surged through his skull, but Rask was too stupid, or too clever, to be afraid. He ran. For days he wandered Talmir with his prize, wrapped in rag and shadow. At first he used it small, made himself appear as a fat noble to enter kitchens and feast on stolen pies, made guards see him as a priest and flee his blessing. With each use he laughed, choked, wet giggles like a man drowning in honey. But the mirror wanted more. It began to speak. Not in words, but desires. When Rask slept, it showed him dreams of palaces, of worship, of walking into rooms and having people weep with awe. And so he obliged. He made himself king of the slums. The mirror wrapped his rags in silks, filled his mouth with silver teeth, made whores swoon and slumlords bow. He ordered executions with a point, laughed as enemies were dragged screaming into pits. But when he looked into their eyes, he saw confusion, pain. They weren't afraid of him. They didn't see him. He smashed a boy's head open against a wall, just to see if he bled gold in the mirror's sight. He did. That night, he began to fracture. The illusions bled into reality. His hands sometimes shimmered, fingers doubling, teeth lengthening into fangs only he could feel. He woke with his skin replaced by fetters, only for it to slough off by morning. He heard music in silence, saw words crawl across the walls, written in his own tongue by things without eyes. One morning he tried to use the mirror to show the truth, just once, to remember who he was. But the mirror screamed. It shattered his reflection into thousands of selves, all writhing, each accusing. He began to forget. Was he still Rask? Was he ever? He no longer needed to whisper to use the mirror. It clung to him like skin. People ran from him in the streets, not in fear, but madness. Their minds broke when they looked. One woman clawed out her eyes and screamed, "I see him twice!" Talmir itself began to bend. Doors opened to the wrong places. Windows showed endless corridors. Rats spoke his name in unison. The sorceress had felt the theft long ago, but now she hunted not for vengeance, but to contain him. She found him at last, in the center of the ruined plaza, enthroned upon a pile of false crowns. His body was no longer his. It was an abstract of form. Too many fingers, a face like broken mirrors, legs that bent wrong. The mirror hovered above him, part of him, nested in his chest like a second heart. Vailitha spoke words that tore the cobbles and summoned chains of silver flame, but Rask, or what was left of him, only smiled. "I have become the wish," he whispered in 12 voices, some screaming, some weeping. The sorceress tried to bind him, but the mirror refused her. It showed her herself, forgotten, weak, mortal. In a moment of fear, she faltered. He reached through her illusion and touched her true face. And she ceased. Her body melted into oil and teeth, swallowed by the mirror as tribute. The plaza imploded. Talmir forgot itself. When the madness passed, the mirror was gone, as was Rask. But sometimes travelers in that part of the world claim to see a man in rags walking backward, whispering to a thing no one else sees. He always offers to show you your best self. Those who accept are never seen the same again. Chapter 3. Tale of the Painted Eyes. In the city of Elthanar, where the spires shimmered like glass needles and every alley stank of perfume and rot, Lady Serena Valk sat at the apex of nobility. She was not the most beautiful, nor the wealthiest, but she was something far more dangerous. Clever. And, like all clever things in a court of vipers, she knew the value of foresight. It began with a whisper, a rumor of a painter in the undermarket, a pale-eyed man who didn't eat, didn't sleep, and worked only in darkness. They called him Kazeth, the dream gouger. He painted in silence, using inks made from grave dirt and oils thick with demon ichor. His portraits, it was said, revealed not what you were, but what you would become. Lady Serena found him. She descended alone into the depths beneath the city, her silks dragging blood and slime, her boots tapping along bones mistaken for stone. She offered him gold. He refused. She offered her soul. He laughed. In the end, she gave him something else, a vial of her own blood, mixed with tears collected on the day her mother died. He smiled, and with skeletal hands began to paint. The portrait took 7 days. When it was unveiled, Sirena gasped, not from horror but delight. The image showed her seated upon the council throne, dressed in mourning black, a circlet of knives upon her brow. Around her, enemies knelt in chains. Her beauty was untouched by age. Her eyes gleamed with cruelty. It was everything she had dreamed. From that moment, her ascent was inevitable. She used the painting like a compass. When assassins came in the night, she would already be waiting, crossbow in hand. When a rival plotted a duel, she would poison his champion before dawn. The painting shifted slightly each week, reflecting new outcomes, sharpening its detail, eyes tilting subtly, a hand moving from lap to dagger hilt, a goblet spilling with just a hint of red. She had it hung above her bed, and each morning she studied it like scripture. Then the second painting arrived. She hadn't commissioned it. It simply appeared, leaning against her mirror, wrapped in black silk, stitched with hair. This one showed her in a garden, laughing with a man whose face was smeared in blood, his hands resting on her shoulders, too tightly. Her expression was soft, trusting, unlike anything she remembered showing anyone. She tried to burn it. The flames licked the frame but recoiled, hissing. The paint boiled but did not fade. The man's smile grew, just slightly. She had the palace scoured. Kazith was gone, his hovel reduced to a smear of bone dust and feathers. No tracks, no witnesses. Still, the paintings kept coming. By the fifth, she had locked them in a vault beneath her estate, but it did not matter. One always found its way back to her. Some were beautiful, others grotesque. One showed her naked in chains, crawling through a tunnel of tongues. Another depicted her sitting atop a tower of corpses, smiling through broken teeth. And always, always, the eyes. At first, they only shimmered. Then they glistened. Then one night, while speaking to the council, she saw them blink. Not in her mind, not a dream. They blinked slow and deliberate. She collapsed. Her servants found her shrieking, slashing at the painting with a rapier, blood soaking her nightdress. The canvas bled with her, absorbing the wounds. From then on, she wore gloves to hide the stitched hands, severed tendons refusing to heal. She grew paranoid. Anyone could be the man from the garden. She executed 4 suitors, drowned her personal guard captain in the bath, and gutted her own chamberlain in front of the court for laughing too sweetly. The council began to whisper. She tried to destroy the portraits again. She hired pyromancers, daemon hunters, even a Sigmarite exorcist who burned alive the moment he opened the vault. His charred corpse screamed once more the next morning before crumbling to ash. The paintings changed again. Now they watched her. They followed her. Wherever she stood in the room, the eyes shifted. If she closed her eyes too long, she saw them on the backs of her lids. When she tried to sleep, she felt their gaze like fingers crawling beneath her skin. Her final act was grand. She summoned all nobles to a masquerade. Poisoned wine, blades laced with mind worms, traps set in chandeliers. She would wipe them all away in a single night of fire and masquerade, start again, unseen. But the moment the feast began, every mask turned toward her, and she realized too late they were not her guests. They were herselves, versions from the paintings, each grinning, each warped, some headless, some rotting, all wearing her face like stolen skin. The doors sealed. Screams echoed across Eltanar's towers for hours, but none dared enter. By dawn, the estate was silent, the windows opaque with paint, the doors sealed by dried blood. Inside, the only living thing was a painting newly finished. It showed a throne room of silence. Lady Serena stood alone, surrounded by portraits that blinked, wept, and whispered. Her smile was eternal and hollow. Chapter 4. Tale of the Clockwork Prophet. Nestled in the blackened fens of Nordring Moor, beneath skies that never cleared and a moon that never waned, lay the village of Targrove. It was a place the gods forgot, a mire-choked hamlet of crooked cottages and half-sunken barns. The people were hard, inbred through generations, their skin pale and slick like wax, their eyes milky with ancestral rot. But they had him. They called it the prophet, an idol of brass and bone seated on a dais of chain stone in the church's nave. It stood near 7 feet tall, humanoid but alien, a latticework of cogwheels and pipes wrapped in flayed flesh like ribbons. Its jaw was a split bellows of iron teeth, and its fingers ticked like clock hands, ever shifting, ever counting. No one remembered who built it. Some said a mad inventor from Altdorf wandered into the swamp a century past. Others whispered it emerged from the mire during the last chaos moon, fully formed, shrieking in binary tongues, until it learned to speak. But what mattered was this: the prophet never lied. At dawn each day it would twitch, convulse, and let out a grinding scream as its eyes, polished obsidian lenses, rolled open. Its mouth would rattle with gears, and in a voice like collapsing stone it would utter a single sentence. Always cryptic, always short, but always true. The well will drown the eldest first. Smoke will rise from the smith's roof, but he will be inside the forge. The child shall bite before it speaks. And always, somehow, these things would come to pass. A well rope snapped, dragging old Cern to his watery death. The smith, drunk and weeping, threw himself into his own furnace on Hexenacht. A mute babe ripped out his wet nurse's throat with perfect teeth before uttering a word. They stopped doubting. They believed. The prophet became more than oracle. It became God. They fed it blood, goats, sheep, eventually criminals. The gears turned smoother with each sacrifice. Its speech grew clearer. When it demanded iron, they mined it from the marshes. When it asked for silence, they cut out a drummer's tongue. And when it predicted famine, they salted the fields and prepared for hunger. It saved them, until it didn't. It began with one prophecy: "The sky shall burn, and all shall dance." They laughed. An omen, surely. A metaphor. No storm nor war-clued came. Yet that night the aurora flared blood-red above the marsh, and every man, woman, and child awoke convulsing, their limbs dancing in spasms they could not control. Some laughed until they choked. Others snapped their own spines, trying to stop. Dozens died before dawn. The prophet did not apologize. Then another: "The twin shall murder the twin, and neither shall survive." No twins lived in Targrove. But on the 3rd day, pregnant midwife, Rella, birthed twins. Pale, squirming things with coal-black eyes. They cried in unison. She tried to drown them that night, but one bit her through the throat and crawled to its sibling's crib. By sunrise, both infants were dead, wrapped in each other's entrails, smiling. Still they obeyed, still they worshipped. But it got worse. Contradictions emerged. "The fire shall be cold. The dead man will speak. He shall kill his father before his birth." Madness, heresy, impossible. But they happened. A barn burned white moon, freezing a herd of cattle solid in place, statues of ice charred black within. The village elder died choking on a fishbone. The next day he stood, flesh sloughing, and spoke through his rotted throat, uttering prayers in a dead dialect no one recognized. A child stabbed his own father to death, yet the man lived again a week later, unmarked, swearing it never occurred. The child remembered it perfectly. Faith turned to fear. The prophet was changing. Its flesh peeled off in long, ribboning coils, revealing more gears beneath, some of which spun against time, ticking backwards. Its voice deepened, fractured, began speaking in chorus, not one mouth, but many, echoing with tones too high, too low. "You have no future. All time is now. Yesterday devours tomorrow." It began giving multiple predictions, opposing truths, paradoxes that bled into the air like poison. The village baker was prophesied to be both murdered by his wife and to kill her himself. Both happened in one night, their bodies stitched together with barbed wire by an unseen hand. Reality no longer obeyed sequence. People began splitting. One man woke to find a copy of himself staring from across the table, identical but 3 days older. They fought until their heads caved in beneath each other's stones. Another woman withered into old age overnight, only to shed her skin like a chrysalis and emerge weeping, a child once more. And the prophet laughed. The gears laughed. The villagers tried to dismantle it. 20 men with hammers, saws, and torches stormed the nave. They struck its frame, shattered its ribs, tore at its entrails of tubing and bone. It bled clock hands, it bled minutes. One man screamed as his face dissolved into dust, aged 1,000 years in seconds. Another collapsed as every hour he had ever slept was ripped from his body, his brain melting from exhaustion. The prophet stood unharmed. Then it gave one final prophecy. I was never built. You built yourselves around me. This is the first day of your beginning. You will die backward. The next morning, the village was gone. No records, no ruins, no names. Only a patch of swamp where time twists like a serpent devouring its tail. And in the center, half buried in peat and lilies, is a bronze gear. It ticks. Unwritten. Chapter 5. Tale of the Three Masks. Had found his body in the sewers beneath Oldwacht, face split in 3. The flesh was torn like parchment, each portion of his face wearing a different expression, one laughing, one grimacing in pain, and the last twisted in silent revelation. His hands were gone, chewed off at the wrists. His chest had been carved with letters in 3 different scripts, none known, none decipherable. Around him, the walls pulsed softly, as if breathing. His name had once been Avan, a gutter-born thief with more charm than caution, a smile made for treachery, and a habit of slipping through fingers and windows with equal grace. He made his living on shadow and sleight, the kind of man who could steal a tooth from a sleeping troll and sell it back to the beast as a lucky talisman. But Avan hungered for more than coin. He wanted power. Not noble titles or crowns, but something real. Something that bent the world to the whisper of a word. He found it in the ruins of the house of Unveiling, an old pleasure manse swallowed by plague and forgotten by the living. Beneath its theater stage, behind a wall of rotten velvet and collapsed timbers, Avan discovered the chamber. It was circular, perfect, dustless. At the center stood a pedestal of carved obsidian, atop which rested a polished wooden case. Inside were the masks. They were not made of leather, nor metal, nor porcelain, but of something else. Their surfaces rippled when touched, like skin over hot marrow. Each bore a single stylized face, one smiling with narrow eyes and sharpened cheeks, the deceiver. One emotionless, adorned with etched runes and a third eye, the sorcerer. And one weeping, its mouth sewn shut, its brow furrowed with carved scars, the truth-sayer. The tree-sayer, they whispered. Avan, ever the opportunist, pocketed them. At first he used the deceiver. Slipping it over his face was like falling into silk. The mask grafted instantly, painless but invasive, like inhaling yourself. He emerged laughing, new teeth sharper, voice smoother, his lies real. He could convince men they were birds, women that their children were thieves. His words could start wars or halt them. He seduced a merchant queen into opening her vaults and sold her family into slavery with a kiss on the cheek. But the mask wouldn't come off easily. Each time he wore it, it lingered longer. His real face began to fade beneath, indistinct. He looked into mirrors and saw only the smiling mask staring back. So he turned to the sorcerer. This one burned. Wearing it was agony, like flensing his soul with razors dipped in sorcery. But the power was real. His eyes glowed and runes danced across his fingers like living flame. He spoke in tongues and the winds obeyed. He conjured spirits from puddles, tore truths from corpses, and walked through walls that had never been broken. He began hearing voices, not his own, words that twisted meanings, spells that spoke him. His blood grew thick and dark, sometimes whispering back when spilled. He dreamt of stars with teeth, and a moon that watched him blinklessly, learning his name. He could no longer read books without the letters rearranging. Finally, desperate, he wore the truth-sayer. It did not speak. It showed. Visions slammed into his brain like spiked hammers. The screams of those he'd betrayed, the hollow gaze of the children he'd orphaned. The mask peeled back illusions, not of the world, but of himself. He saw every lie he'd ever believed, every excuse he'd whispered to himself. The mask didn't weep. He did. The mask taught him truths that should not be known. He saw the chaos gods in his dreams, not as demons, but as inevitabilities. He saw Tzeentch's hand moving through history like a needle threading flesh. He saw himself not as a thief, but as a pawn crafted from his own decisions. He saw the moment of his death over and over, each different, each worse. But worst of all, he saw the masks for what they were. Not artifacts, but faces, removed from something greater. Something ancient, dreaming beneath the folds of unreality. They wanted to go back. The deceiver began whispering constantly, turning his thoughts to rot. It promised freedom, begged for flesh. The sorcerer bled spells from his skin without consent, warping his body in knots of bone and brass. The truth-sayer just stared, unblinking. He tried to discard them. They returned. He burned them. They reappeared on his pillow. He drowned them. They re-emerged in his lungs. He locked them away. They emerged stitched into his chest. He wore them all at once, in madness. 3 masks fused into his soul. His body twisted, warped by conflicting wills. One hand beckoned with charm, the other cast fire. His face split, like clay torn apart. One eye smiled, the other burned, the third wept. He howled as reality trembled around him, illusions peeling back to reveal shifting geometries. He fled into the sewers, raving, 3 voices in battle. In the end, his own hands betrayed him, one slicing his throat, another casting a curse to freeze his heart, the last trying to write a final truth, in blood, upon the wall. Only the word mask was finished before he collapsed. Now they say the sewers breathe. Sometimes, when fog clogs the alleys of Uldwacht, you'll hear laughter, chanting, and sobbing all at once. And if you find a mask lying alone in the muck, do not touch it. Eggs waiting. Chapter 6. The second night. Paranoia creeps in. The catacombs dripped. Condensation seeped from the cracked ceiling in slow, sticky tears, pooling in grooves carved by centuries of decay. The stale air was tinged with a sweet, rotting musk, mold, blood, and the faintest perfume of something else. Something wrong. Something watching. Above, the reality storms still raged. The survivors could hear them. The crackling shrieks, the inverted thunder, the sound of buildings being rewritten. But down here, the silence had become unbearable. It began with the food. They had 6 days' worth of salted pork, dry crusts, and root mash stored in Laska's satchels, carefully wrapped and rationed. She insisted on dividing it each morning, but on this second night, one bag was found half empty, chewed open by something with fingers, not teeth. "No rats down here," muttered Bertha, her hand on her pike. "We would have heard them." "It was the girl," hissed Jordan, gesturing to the silent child sitting near the wall, her silk-wrapped form hugging a broken statue. "She never speaks, never eats where we can see, and she hums that wretched chant every time someone blinks too long." The others glanced at the child. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, fingers slowly drawing sigils in the dust. She looked up, smiled, didn't deny it. "She's a vessel," muttered Broger, knuckles white around a rusted cleaver. "Or a lure. Zinch marks those who seem innocent." "Or maybe you're marked, old man," Laska snapped, removing her plague mask to reveal cracked lips and yellowed teeth. "You mutter in your sleep, say names we don't know. I heard you chanting to an hourglass." Tension rippled through the chamber like heat off pitch. Davos, the youngest among them, a sellsword barely into manhood with too clean armor, backed away, hand at his belt. "No offense, but I don't trust any of you. Last night I woke up and saw my own face staring at me from the ceiling. One of you put it there." No one denied that either. The air grew colder. The fresco on the wall, the half-peeled image of Sigmar striking down the twin serpent, had shifted. The serpent was coiled around Sigmar's neck now, whispering into his ear. Jorgen noticed it first and began scratching at his skin until he bled. "It's the stories," he mumbled. "They seep into the stone. They're changing things." The whispers returned. Faint scratching from within the walls. Not rats, voices, familiar, like a lover calling from the other room, or a dead parent whispering your childhood name. You could never hear them clearly, only just enough to remember. The second torch sputtered and died, plunging half the room into shadow. "That's it," said Bertha, standing with an audible snap of joints. "We need to stop this madness before someone kills someone." "We already did," whispered the child, finally speaking. Her voice was glass breaking underwater. "Remember?" Everyone froze. One by one, they turned to look at the far corner, the darkest one, behind the broken altar. There was a body, small, slumped, half-rotted. It had been one of them. Hadn't it? A woman, long hair, rusted breastplate, a traitor from Null. Lisette. None of them remembered her clearly until now. Her name surfaced like a bloated corpse. "Gods, she was with us," muttered Berger, dropping to his knees. Why didn't anyone see?" Tavos rasped. "She told a story. That's all I remember," said Laska. "It was about a city made of glass. She burned," said the child. "When she stopped talking." The silence returned, suffocating. They all stared at Lisette's corpse. Her mouth was open, stuffed with dry root mash. It clicked then. She had taken food that wasn't hers. Been found out. And then... What? A trial? A ritual? No one remembered. The memory was there, underneath the surface, scratching to get out. But it was twisted, blurred, warped. "I think we should tell another story," Broger said softly. His voice cut through the mounting madness like a dull knife. He stood, his shadow cast long and crooked across the stone. "We made a pact. We keep the stories going. If we don't, if the silence wins, it feeds." No one disagreed. They gathered around the guttering torch, backs to the walls, eyes darting toward the shadows. The child returned to her humming, but now it was quieter, more rhythmic, almost a lullaby. Bertha removed a strip of flesh from her arm, wrapped it in cloth, and set it beside the remains of the food. An offering. insurance. Jodin muttered prayers under his breath, but none of them were to Sigmar anymore. Broger cleared his throat. "Tonight's tale," he began, "is about a village that asked for truth and received it." Outside, the storm howled again. But for now, inside the catacombs, the words flowed, and the eyes in the wall closed. Chapter 7. Tale of the Weird-Bound Scroll. The scholar's name was Calder Venn. Once he had lectured in the ivory towers of Marienburg, a man of long robes and precise words, his fingers always stained with ink and incense ash. His colleagues called him meticulous, a mind of clarity and cold logic. But Calder had a hunger, the same that had led him to the vaults of forgotten temples, to libraries scabbed with dust and madness. He did not study magic to cast it. He studied it to understand it. And that is what brought him to the ruins of Kremhall. The village had long vanished beneath marsh and mire, choked by plague and buried by the Empire's silence. But beneath its rotted chapel, Calder found what he sought, a sealed reliquary, thick with warding sigils and rusted lock chains, pulsing with a heat not of this world. Inside lay the scroll. It was rolled tight within a case of lacquered bone. The flesh binding was pale, tattooed with runes that squirmed when touched. A stitch of golden thread held it shut, and beneath it, in old rakespill, was carved, "Write not without witness, speak not without sacrifice." Calder, of course, ignored it. In his study, deep beneath the iron-bound doorways of his personal sanctum, he broke the seal. The scream that came from the scroll was not human. It cracked the lantern glass, shattered the inkpots, and made the air bend. But when it was over, the parchment lay unfurled, smooth, clean, inviting. The first word he read aloud was, "Rain," and the ceiling wept. Water burst from the stones above, cascading in torrents. It drenched his robes, soaked his tomes, rusted his instruments. But it obeyed. As quickly as it came, it stopped the moment he looked away from the word. The second word was flame. His hearth erupted. A serpent of fire coiled from the ash, danced across his desk, then slithered back into the coals with a hiss. It worked. The scroll wrote reality. He began small, conjuring apples, mending torn pages, commanding candles to bloom into light. Every word he spoke from the scroll happened. The ink vanished as he read. One by one, he unlocked its vocabulary. But each word cost him something. A paper cut, barely noticed, grew infected. A tooth ached for days before crumbling into salt. One morning, he woke to find every mirror in his study smashed. He hadn't touched them. The scroll was thinning the veil. He tried to stop. He tried to hide it. But the scroll called to him. It bled when ignored. Thick, tar-like ichor that stained his desk, shaped into letters in sleep. So he escalated. He wrote revive. His dead cat returned from the pyre, skin too tight over its bones, eyes filmed with grease. It mewed. No, spoke. In a voice he had heard in nightmares. He wrote reveal. The walls peeled. Not physically, but perceptually. He saw the leering faces behind stone, the way shadows bled against time, the maggots of fate that crawled behind every moment. His hair began falling out in patches. His skin developed a rash that itched with screams. Still, he wrote, flight, and he soared. Steel storm, and he drowned his rivals in wind. Control, and a magistrate slit his own throat at Calder's feet. But the more he spoke, the more the words spoke back. They whispered to him now, not just from the scroll, but from every surface. The floorboards muttered prophecies, his blood-etched runes in the basin. At night he heard syllables being chanted in voices he knew were not his own. The scroll grew shorter. Only a handful of words remained. 1. In the center, pulsed red. Rewrite. Calder stared at it for hours. His hands trembled. His reflection, a warped, bloated mockery of his younger self, grinned back from the blackened window. He spoke. Rewrite. The world fractured. His body split into versions. One wept, one laughed, one screamed until its throat burst. The air around him collapsed inward, sucked into the scroll, which unfurled to show not words but scenes, a history rewritten. In one he was a king, tyrant-robed, burning cities. In another he was a martyr, nailed to a tree that bled faces. In yet another he was nothing, just bones in a ditch, scribbled with curses. The scribbled with curses. The scroll devoured all of them. He tried to tear it. It tore him. His arms unraveled like wet rope. His spine popped, vertebrae by vertebrae, forming new letters mid-air before turning to ash. His eyes rolled back, their nerves extending into ink-dripping lines across the floor. His jaw dislocated as he tried to scream, but his tongue had turned to parchment, upon which new words wrote themselves. Knowledge is hunger. You asked. You read. Wait right. By the time the scroll was rolled shut again, Calder was gone. Only the scroll remained, longer now, ink replenished, flesh smoother. Waiting for a new scholar, one who dares to read their fate and feed it. Chapter 8. Tale of the Faithless Flame. The congregation of Valgrim's Reach once lit their prayers with fire. Every dawn the priests of Sigmar would ignite the censer flames upon the alabaster altar, and in the flickering gold they would see truth, visions of purity, omens of justice. The fire was sacred, uncorrupted, drawn from the pyromantic fonts deep within the cathedral's root, holy and eternal. Father Merrick was their keeper. A towering man of iron voice and cracked knuckles, his sermons could shatter a man's guilt like glass. He had seen war, seen heresy, and emerged baptized in flame. His faith was not gentle, it was fire itself, burning, cleansing, absolute. And then came the changeling. It began with whispers among the children, how one of the novices had two shadows, how Sister Kelda spoke in reverse at night. Then came the vanishing. 3 acolytes gone, robes folded on the floor like deflated skins. Then, laughter during silent prayer. High, mocking, echoing when no mouths moved. Merrick demanded purification. He led the rite beneath the cathedral, into the fire sanctum, where the eternal flame licked ever upwards from a vent sealed in silver script. He stood above it, arms raised, voice thunderous as he called to Sigmar, invoked truth, and let the holy fire rise. It answered. The flame swelled, blue-white, pure. It leapt into the sanctum like a living serpent and wrapped Marek's arms in fire without burning him. His eyes turned gold. His tongue glowed. He roared with scripture, and the flame obeyed. He used it to cleanse. The next day, he pressed a crying acolyte's hand to the flame. It sizzled, hissed, burned through bone. And yet, the child did not scream. Instead, the flesh turned black, peeled back, and laughed. It slithered out of its skin in a ribbon of eyes and teeth, unraveling mid-air like a scroll of heresy. The changeling, the creature of Zench. Formless, shifting, parasitic chaos. It had worn faces for months, sowed whispers, fed on doubt, but now it burned. Marek watched its many forms dissolve in the fire. A weeping babe, a snarling beast, a mirror-faced nun. It shrieked in tongues until it was nothing. The people hailed Marek as savior, prophet, chosen. But the flame did not leave him. He heard it that night in his bones, a whisper behind his teeth, in the beating of his heart. You are worthy. He did not sleep. The next day he invoked the flame again, just to be sure. He passed it over his congregation as they prayed. It flared over them like a gentle tide, until it hissed upon Brother Elric's shoulder. Elric screamed as his flesh blistered, his bones twisted. He cried for forgiveness, but Marek saw no sin. Still, the fire demanded it. He burned Elric alive before the altar, and the flame grew stronger. It began showing him things. He looked into it and saw confessions not yet spoken. Saw a widow who stole communion wine, a boy who doubted during sermons, a baker who lusted after his cousin. The flame whispered their sins into his ears as he slept, coiled around his spine like a serpent of judgment. He obeyed. He burned the baker in his oven. He shoved the widow into the incense brazier and nailed the boy to the chapel doors. Each death fed the flame. Each death brought clarity. The cathedral changed. Stained glass wept molten colors. Candles burned in reverse. Statues of Sigmar twisted, no longer striking down daemons but embracing them. The congregation dwindled, but those who remained did so in silence, afraid to breathe without permission. One morning Marek looked into the flame and saw himself, but not as he was. He saw a figure tall and faceless, eyes alight with fire, his body woven from ash and scrolls. His voice echoed in every tongue. In the vision he stood before the Empire, a burning crown upon his skull, proclaiming a new gospel. Faith without fire is hollow. He smiled. That night he brought the eternal flame into the nave itself. He broke the ward's seals, shattered the golden vent, and let it breathe. The fire erupted, alive, joyous, cracking the stone floor and reaching toward the rafters. It howled like a choir. The pews ignited, the altar cracked in two. The few who remained screamed, pleaded. He burned them all. Then he stepped into the fire himself. It did not kill him. It welcomed him. His flesh blackened, then peeled, revealing a skeleton forged from Scripture, his ribs engraved with psalms, his skull crowned with thorned flame. He no longer needed to speak. His presence burned truth into the minds of those who saw him. He wandered now, through forests, through towns, always preceded by smoke, preaching the gospel of fire, calling to the faithless. The flame inside him whispers still. Cleanse, enlighten, transform. Those who see him do not survive the sermon. They burst into flame mid-prayer, their screams harmonizing with the crackle. Only ashes remain, and from those ashes new disciples rise, flame-eyed, whispering the name of the faithless flame. Chapter 9. Tale of the Fool Who Outsmarted the Archmage. In the gilded spires of Narenhald, where reality dripped like candle wax from the lips of chanting mages, Archmage Thelamore ruled his floating tower of Yedozark. He was old, not in years, but in existence. His birth long since rewritten through enchantment and incantation, his form suspended by runes burned into the skin of slain angels. He had outlived emperors. He had bound time to his wrist. He believed himself flawless, which made him perfect for mockery. Enter Rezel, the jester. He was a thin, wiry man, face painted in a permanent grin, bells jingling even when still. Where Thelamore conjured storms and summoned demons, Rezel juggled apples and insults. He was gutter-born, raised in the leper pits of Marbodon, taught sleight of hand by thieves and mimicry by dying whores. He lived for laughter, and more than that, for humiliation. Rezul was a jester by trade, but a saboteur by passion. He had embarrassed high priests, shamed nobles into suicide, and once tricked a merchant prince into marrying a goose. But Ado's arc was his greatest ambition. It started with a riddle. During the Archmage's yearly Ascendance Day, a celebration of his latest magical breakthrough, Rezul infiltrated the tower disguised as a one-man performance troupe. He presented Thelamore with a gift, a mirror that laughed back. When the Archmage peered into it, the reflection cackled and called him bald beneath the brain. The court laughed. Thelamore did not. But he allowed Rezul to stay. The jester played his part well. He performed tricks that defied reason, juggling fire without burn, duplicating himself, balancing on air. Thelamore, amused and intrigued, allowed him to perform during his private council. And Rezul began to whisper. He left scrolls in side chambers, slipped dreams into the wine, told stories that turned to prophecy, and always, he laughed. Subtly, Thelamore's spells began to misfire. Portals refused to close. Glyphs bled ink. One scrying pool began showing nothing but Rezul's smiling face, no matter the target. The Archmage confronted him. "You meddle in things you do not comprehend," he snarled, his staff splitting the air with crackling energy. Rezul only bowed, bells jingling. "Then perhaps you should comprehend them better." Thelamore, pride-wounded, challenged the fool. A duel, not of might, but of mind. Each would cast illusions in turn, trying to deceive the other. First to be fooled loses. A crowd gathered in the central observatory, mages, acolytes, and seers. They formed a ring around the two, the Archmage cloaked in robes that whispered equations, and Rezul clad in patchwork silk, his smile too wide, his eyes too calm. Thelamore conjured first. A paradise. A field of lilies beneath twin suns. Voices singing in chorus. Rezul's mother rising from the flowers, arms open. But Rezul blinked, reached out, and snapped the illusion with a jester's clap. "Too sentimental," he chided, "and you never knew my mother." His turn. Rezul waved a hand, and the room vanished. Now they stood in a cellar. A man wept in chains. Around him stood 10 figures, all Thelamore, all aged differently, each accusing the chained one of treachery. "You betrayed yourself," they screamed. "We warned you." Thelamore hesitated. He stumbled. But he broke it. Back in the chamber, sweat dotted his brow. They went on, illusion after illusion, each more surreal, more violent, more intricate. Blood rained, teeth spoke, suns screamed. Thelamore conjured a world where Rezul had already lost, and the crowd applauded. Rezul conjured Thelamore's childhood, twisted it into a dirge sung by corpses. Then came the final trick. Rezul grinned and simply said, "Look behind you." Thelamore didn't. He laughed, a child's jest. But Rezul said nothing more. The Archmage turned to the crowd, arms raised to claim victory. But they were gone. The observatory gone. The sky above was black, filled with eyes. The floor beneath him, flesh. Towering over him stood not Rezul, but a mirror. Not reflecting him, but recording him. He turned back. Rezul stood at the center of 1,000 versions of himself, each from a different trick, different moment. The real Rezul stepped forward, expression gone cold. "You never asked why I came." Thelamore stammered, power building in his staff. "I came to show you something," Rezul whispered. He touched the Archmage's brow, and Thelamore shattered. His mind broke into visions, every spell he'd ever cast gone wrong, every lie he'd told himself about being incorruptible. He saw himself as a child torturing a cat, as a student stealing spells, as a master manipulating time to avoid death but failing to escape himself. His heart ruptured with guilt, his soul peeled back in layers. He screamed, but no one heard. Back in the observatory, Rezel bowed to an empty room. Thelimor stood behind him, smiling. Or something wearing him did. The court never saw Rezel again, but the Archmage laughed now. All the time, even when he slept. Chapter 10. Tale of the Tower That Walks. It was first seen trudging across the salt wastes of Marrow Point, an obsidian spire with legs like tree trunks and a crown of rusted spires screaming metal into the sky. Locals called it the Tower That Walks, and wherever it passed memories bled from the ground. Crops withered into dust, names vanished from family trees, lovers forgot each other in mid-embrace. But the tower offered. For those brave or broken enough to enter, it gave knowledge, forbidden tomes, lost spells, demonic truths. In exchange, it took a childhood, a name, a brother's face. The more you asked, the more it claimed. And so the warband of Gorvin Blacktooth came with steel and fire. There were 8 of them, cutthroats, hedge sellswords, outlaws, scarred and wicked. Men and women who had burned villages and eaten human hearts. They wanted what the tower held, not for truth, but for profit. Sell the tomes, crack the vaults, rape its secrets and leave it empty. They found it kneeling in a hollow of cracked stone, legs buried, hunched like a beast at rest. Doors lined its base, twisting, never in the same place twice. Spires above moaned in the wind. Gorvin laughed and spat into the dust. "You can't trick steel," he said. "We're not here to bargain. We're here to take." They entered. The door opened with a sigh, not of wind or stone, but of a person, a soft exhale of relief. Inside there were no rooms, just hallways, endless. Turning back always led forward. The floors pulsed faintly beneath their boots, warm like skin. The walls were etched with symbols in blood and bone, and sometimes they twitched as if flinching at unseen blows. The first room they found was a library. 1,000 books hovered in air, spinning slowly. One mercenary, Jack the Axeborn, reached for a crimson tome. It fell into his hand and spoke, in his mother's voice. The words told of his future, his death beneath a bridge, devoured by dogs he once fed. He laughed. Lies. But when they moved on, he forgot who he was, forgot his name, his purpose. He simply walked with them, confused, smiling, calling himself brother. They pressed on. They found a chamber of mirrors next. Each glass showed a different self. Some were monstrous, some divine. One showed Gorvin as a child drowning in a black pond. Another showed Vasa, his second in command, naked, aged, screaming as she was stoned by her own children. The mirrors cracked as they stared too long. One shattered entirely, sucking Alin the archer into its surface with a wet, tearing shriek. He didn't even scream, just vanished. They found stairs. They ascended without climbing. Each step brought them higher, though their feet stayed still. The air thickened. Blood began dripping from the walls, softly, rhythmically, like the tower was weeping. They came to a room where something waited. The figure, thin, long, its robes were made of written pages, its face blank, save for 1,000 blinking eyes. Its hands were quills. It didn't speak, but it wrote. Each letter scratched into the air. The words hovered. You seek knowledge, I offer. Old memory for one truth? Gorvin growled. We're not here to trade. And then you forget. They raised weapons. But the moment steel touched flesh, memory bled from them. Gorvin blinked, blade in hand. Why are we here? He asked. Vasa looked around, confused. Were we chasing someone? Jack giggled and said, I think we live here. The figure turned and walked away, no steps, just vanishing between thoughts. They wondered again. They found a vault filled with gold that turned to teeth when touched, a stairwell that led back to the first room, but the books now screamed. Jack lay curled in a corner, skin peeled back like wet bark, muttering, There's a name in my belly, but I forgot the letters. One by one, they dissolved. Not in flesh, but in purpose. Masa slit her own throat trying to recall her daughter's face, only to find her blood spelled out the wrong name. Gorvin held onto his rage, the last tether. But when he found a window, saw the outside world, he did not recognize it. He saw a black sky with a green sun. He saw rivers flowing upward. He saw a field of corpses wearing his face. And he laughed. He sat, cross-legged, and whispered, It's mine now. The tower still walks, sometimes slowly, sometimes not at all. Doors open, faces peer out. Sometimes mercenaries go in. Always they forget. Always they become part of it. And sometimes, if the wind is right, you'll hear a voice whispering, I remember something important. I just don't know what it is. Then the door opens. Chapter 11. The Third Night. Visions and Doubt. The third night began with the smell of salt and meat. It drifted through the catacombs like a memory, wrong and warm, clinging to the stone like rot. The survivors stirred from broken sleep, their bodies aching, their minds thinned by the air that pulsed too slowly to be natural. The flickering torchlight no longer cast proper shadows. Shapes lingered in places where none stood. Laska was the first to speak. Where is Davos? No one answered. His bedroll was there, still folded, untouched, as if he'd never slept in it. But his belt was gone, and the ring he always wore, a crude copper band from some forgotten sweetheart, lay beside a pool of damp dust. The ground was stained faintly red. No trail, no signs of struggle, just absence. Jordan knelt, muttering prayers in a tongue no longer his own. His hands trembled. He's been taken, or unmade, or maybe he never existed. No. Brogar's voice was tight. He was here. We drank together the first night. He told a joke. Something about goat legs. Bertha stood, pike gripped in both hands, face pale. That wasn't Davos. That was... She stopped, blinked. I can't remember his voice. The girl, still silent, pointed toward the far wall. And there, beneath the altar of bone and melted saints, the mural had changed. Once it had been static, depicting Sigmar striking down the twin serpent. Now the serpent coiled around Sigmar's arm, whispering into his ear. And behind them both, new shapes had emerged, painted in flesh tones and ochre. Faces, familiar. The survivors stared. There was Laska, mask askew, hands holding a scroll wrapped in tongues. There was Brogar, drenched in ink, laughing as flames devoured a library. Bertha knelt in a field of cracked mirrors, her own face reflected back a dozen ways, none hers. And Jordan, hanging upside down from a clock made of bones, his eyes replaced with spinning runes. Even the child was there, but taller, older, her hands raised to the sky as if conducting the stars. No one had painted it. He was simply there. "What is this?" Laska hissed, pulling her blade free. "A trick." "The tales," Brugar whispered. "The ones we told. They're real. They've been written into the walls, into this place." Jordan stepped closer, his breath fogging against the wall. "No, not just our tales. Look." He pointed. In the far left corner, nearly hidden beneath a layer of black dust, was a new scene. A jester, face split 3 ways, dancing before a burning archmage. And beyond it, a tower with legs walking across a bleeding plain. "The stories are bleeding through," he muttered, "becoming stone, becoming memory." The torch sputtered. It then died. Darkness swallowed the chamber like a lung inhaling. In the pitch black, things moved. Footsteps that didn't echo, breathing that didn't belong. The sound of chalk scratching on stone, fast, frantic, laughing. Then light flared. The torch relit itself. The mural had shifted again. Davos was now there, impaled on a tree of quills. His mouth gaped in a silent scream, and in his eyes were reflected the 10 survivors, 9 alive, and 1 face missing. Laska screamed and slashed the wall. The blade struck stone. No effect. Jordan began weeping. "This place, it remembers. Every word we speak feeds it. Every lie, every truth. It drinks us. It rewrites us." Bertha turned, backing toward the altar. "We need to leave. Find the old crypt stairs. Go deeper. Maybe escape under the mountain." "No," the child said. Everyone froze. It was the first time she had spoken since the 2nd night. "There's no deeper. There's only down. The catacombs' heart is listening. We're inside the wound now." Brogar's lip quivered. "What wound?" She smiled. "The one that never closes." The torchlight pulsed, red, then blue, then green. The mural shimmered, the figures within beginning to move, slowly, like things waking from painted sleep. Jordan fell to his knees, babbling prayers. Bertha stood frozen. Laska backed into a corner and began laughing. "It's all written, every word, every chapter." Brogar gripped the child's shoulders. "What is this?" Her eyes were black now, no whites. "It's the 3rd night," she whispered. "That's when the stories start telling themselves." And behind her, on the wall, a new scene was forming. A group huddled in shadow, surrounded by bones. 1 missing. The rest watching the wall as it painted them, brushstroke by brushstroke. As the survivors watched. As he watched. Chapter 12. Tale of the Oracle's Gamble. His name was Luthen Bale, and he was addicted to luck. Not the kind you pray for, the kind you cheat. Dice weighted just enough to fool a glance, cards marked in sweat and knife scratches, whispers traded in the dead of night for a rigged wheel. He'd made a fortune at the gambling pits of Maramoor and burned it in a week on brothel wine and wagers even the gods wouldn't touch. Luthen loved the thrill of the brink, the moment before ruin or triumph, but by his 33rd year, his luck had dried into ash. Debts bound him like chains, and every man he owed had knives for fingers. So he fled into the hills of Sarnath's Vale, chasing whispers. Whispers of an oracle, blind, old, unmoved by gods or gold, but willing to wager. She didn't trade in coin, she traded in truths. Real ones, and she never lost. Luthen found her in a hollowed tree grown over an ancient altar, high atop the cliffs where birds circled but never landed. She sat on a slab of black stone, shrouded in veils that flowed without wind. Her sockets were empty, but something moved behind them, pulsing with knowledge not meant to be seen. "You've come to play," she rasped, without looking. He nodded, breathless. "I've come to win." "No one wins," she said. "Only loses more slowly." He sat across from her. The table between them was carved with runes that bled when touched, groaning as they reshaped themselves for the game. Dice of teeth, cards of skin, a deck inked in screaming sigils. The rules were simple. Wager a truth and win another. If you lie, the game ends. If you falter, the game ends. If you win, the reward is clarity. He placed his first bet. "My mother died in childbirth." She smiled, thin lips twitching. "True?" A new truth slid toward him on the table, a blood-stained card that pulsed like a wound. "Your father sold your name to escape death." He grinned. "Good one." And so it began. He wagered memories of lovers, crimes he'd never confessed, his first kill. She gave him names of his betrayers, faces of those who plotted his downfall. He saw the future in fractured glimpses, coins dropping from the sky, a masked queen weeping at his feet, a city burning in his laughter. Truth fed truth. With each round he grew stronger, faster. The world bent around him. He began winning bets he didn't even make, birds dying mid-flight, dice rolling his number before he cast them, people choking on words he knew they'd say. He started calling himself Fate's Fist. The oracle watched, silent, as he devoured truth after truth. Then came the final wager. Luthen smirked, eyes wild. "I want to know who I really am. What's at the root of me? The deepest truth." She was silent. "For that," he said, "I wager my favorite truth, the one I tell myself every night to sleep." She blinked. "And what is that?" "That I am no one's pawn. That I made myself, every cut, every con, every gamble, mine alone." The air thickened. The table cracked. The runes bled openly now, the blood crawling across the surface toward her fingertip. "Very well," she said, and handed him a shard of mirror. He yelped and screamed. What looked back was not a man, but a thing. A hollow marionette, bound in flesh, runes and memory threads, eyes like empty coin slots, mouth sewn shut with contracts. The soul within pulsed not with identity, but with purpose, pre-written, engineered. He saw himself forged in a black forge by robed figures, each face blurred. Saw the scripts they fed him. The luck was artificial, the choices directed, every win designed to guide him somewhere. He wasn't born, he was invented. A walking dice roll with a mouth. The puppet of fate. Luthen dropped the mirror, but it cut him. Deep. The blood flowed in symbols. His memories began unraveling, like a thread pulled from a spool. He forgot his mother's face. Then her name. Then whether he even had one. The oracle stood. Taller now, her veils billowed. "You asked," she said, voice now layered. "You bet. And you saw." He tried to run, but his legs crumpled, strings cut. She knelt beside him. "There is one more truth," she whispered, pressing a finger to his brow. "The game was always you." The runes on the slab ignited. His skin cracked like eggshell. He screamed once, pure animal, then collapsed, hollowed out. When they found the altar days later, there was no body, only a set of cards made of stretched skin. Each bore a different truth. One still bled. It read, "I bet my soul, and I lost." Chapter 13. Tale of the Betrayer's Wedding. It was the most anticipated union in the western provinces, the joining of House Varnus and House Clath, two bloodlines soaked in gold, silk, and slaughter. Their feud had lasted a century, rivers dammed in spite, cities razed, over dowries withheld. But now, at long last, they were to be united. The wedding was held at Castle Thyrol, a forgotten fortress razed from the bones of heretics and repainted in fresh silver for the occasion. Invitations were sent to dukes, cardinals, merchant princes, and warlords. But each guest arrived wearing a mask, by decree of both families, to honor anonymity. The invitation read, "To bury old hatreds beneath new veils." But each guest came armed. The bride, Lady Catacombs, was a serpent in silk, lips red as murder, eyes dark with disdain. The groom, Lord Theronclave, wore his smile like a wound that never healed. They stood beneath a canopy of black lilies, surrounded by whispering nobles in ivory masks. The priest, blindfolded in tradition, spoke the vows with a trembling voice, but none listened. Every guest's hand hovered near a concealed blade, each scanning the others for signals, for slips. For in truth, every single guest was an assassin. None were who they claimed to be. Each served a different master, rival lords, ancient cults, foreign kings. Each had been ordered to kill someone during the wedding, sometimes the bride, sometimes the groom, sometimes each other. And none knew the others shared the same purpose. They toasted with poisoned wine, every glass laced with a different toxin, each with a timed delay. They clapped at the music, fingers twitching over crossbows tucked into sleeves. They danced with corpses in disguise, blades glinting beneath lace. The first death was subtle. A violinist missed a note. Blood sprayed from her mouth as her instrument exploded, laced with runes carved into the strings by a rival guild. No one reacted. The second came during the feast. A man in a gold mask choked on a fig. His throat closed, eyes bulging, tongue swelling like rotten fruit. The apothecaries found powdered gall worm in his goblet, an assassin's trick from distant Cathay. The third was deliberate. A toast, a clash of goblets, then the sound of a throat ripping as a noble stabbed his partner through the ribs with a fork honed to razor point. The woman died, gasping, her real name. He smiled, and was poisoned seconds later, his wine glass cracking in his clenched hand as he convulsed. Still, the wedding continued. Kaita and Theron danced as if nothing was wrong. She whispered into his ear, "Who dies first, do you think?" He replied, "Whichever of us forgets the steps." They waltzed through blood. By night's end, over 20 lay dead, choking, bleeding, their masks still on. But the real betrayal had not yet come. It was the priest. He removed his blindfold, revealing eyes of glimmering flame. Not a man, a servant of Tzinch, sent by no lord, no house, no cult. He had come for the same reason the others had, to see the end of the houses. He spread his arms, spoke a word that cracked the stones. Each guest's mask fused to their face. Screams erupted. Masks melted, etched into flesh. Identities warped. One woman tore at her cheeks until her hands came away with skin and teeth. Another convulsed as her mask peeled her thoughts into ribbons, her skull folding into the porcelain itself. The bride and groom were the last to be touched. They drew blades identical, curved, ceremonial, turned on each other in perfect unison. "Did you think I didn't know?" she hissed. He smiled. "Did you think I'd marry you?" They clashed. Steel sang, blood sprayed, veils tore. They moved like dancers, like predators. She stabbed him in the thigh. He gutted her in return. Her nails scraped his throat. His sword pierced her stomach. They died locked together. The priest stepped over them, collecting blood in a chalice of bone. The survivors, those who hadn't bled or screamed into madness, fled the hall. But none remembered who they had been sent to kill. None recalled which master they served. The masks had stolen it all. The castle remains abandoned, a cursed ruin. But sometimes, when moonlight strikes the stone just right, you can hear music, soft, haunting, the rustle of silk, the clash of blades. And on the highest balcony, two figures in fused masks dance forever. Chapter 14. Tale of the Beast Within the Maze. The maze of Gralhun was not built. It grew. A snarl of stone and thorned iron deep in the howling wastes, it writhed across the scorched land like a wound in motion. Its walls twisted with every dusk, its halls rearranged by unseen hands. None who entered returned the same, if they returned at all. At its center, it was said, lay a beast, not of flesh, but of betrayal and rage, wearing the skin of men. A demon, they said, a fragment of Tzeentch laughter given form. And within it was trapped Sir Cadric's brother, Sir Darien, the younger, brighter, beloved one, taken during a skirmish near the wastes. Reports said he'd chased a fleeing cultist into the maze's edge. He never came out. Only his horse returned, foaming, with its eyes gouged out, and his sword hanging from its stirrup like a broken limb. Cadric swore an oath before Sigmar's altar. Bathed in his brother's blood, he would enter the maze and drag Darien back, no matter what stood in his path. He rode into the wastes with a black steed, a silver greatsword, and a tabard soaked in ancestral vows. No companions, no fear. The maze welcomed him. It opened with a groan, walls parting like cracked ribs, swallowing him into darkness that stank of ozone and wet copper. Inside, the air was wrong. It moved too slowly. Every breath dragged like syrup. The ground pulsed beneath his boots, alive, wounded. The walls were not just stone, but faces, frozen mid-scream, mouths open in silence. Some moved, some watched. He pressed forward. Each corridor twisted as he passed. Behind him, the path closed. Ahead, it split again and again, spirals, loops, drops, impossible angles that made his stomach churn and his sense of time dissolve. No sky above, no light save for the flame of his lantern, which flickered with faces each time he blinked. He saw shapes, figures lurking at the edge of vision. His father, his mother, the squire who died beneath his command. All walked with broken spines, reaching toward him, whispering in Darien's voice. He hacked them down. They didn't bleed. They cracked like pottery, bursting into swarms of centipedes that screamed like infants. For what felt like days or moments, he found the center. A cathedral of bone, pillars of spine, vaulted ribs arching into darkness. At its heart stood the beast. It was him. No, not quite. A mirror. A twin. The reflection blurred in blood. The same armor, dented. The same eyes, but hungrier. Its sword was not silver, but obsidian, etched with moving runes that swam like fish in oil. Cadric, it said. His voice was perfect. His voice. I am Darien. No, Cadric growled. You're the demon. I'm what he became. They circled each other. I saw what you would never look at, the beast said. Your rage, your fear, your secret joy when I failed. I'm not your brother. I'm your truth. Cadric attacked. Steel clashed. The cathedral shook. Sparks flew as blade met blade, each strike echoing with a scream not theirs. The beast moved as he did, predicting every thrust, mirroring every parry. It smiled even as it bled. He struck deep, cutting into the beast's ribs. Black fire poured out. The beast laughed. I bled for you. it said. "I died for you. I became this to show you who you are." Cataric roared, severing its arm. The beast knelt, smiling through the pain. "You'll never leave," it whispered, "because I'm not the daemon. You are." Cadron hesitated. In that moment, the beast lunged, plunging its remaining hand into his chest, not piercing flesh, but thought. Memories poured out. His jealousy, his contempt. Every moment he cursed Darian's smile. Every secret wish that he had been the elder, the loved one, the hero. The beast drank it all and became whole. Cadric collapsed, choking. As the light in his lantern died, he looked up. The beast was gone. In its place stood Sir Cadric, fresh, clean, silver sword gleaming. He turned and walked from the maze, armor shining with victory, voice calm. When he returned to the keep, they called him Savior. But at night, his eyes twitched. His fingers carved spirals into the stone, and sometimes, when no one watched, he whispered into the fire, "I found my brother," and laughed. Chapter 15. Tale of the Book That Read You. The book had no title. It lay on the altar of the ruined sanctum of Nauthyr, bound in leather so dark it seemed to drink light. Its clasp was not metal, but jawbone, human, fused at the hinge. When opened, it did not reveal inked words, but empty parchment. Page after page of pale, waiting flesh. Unwritten, a scholar of occult tongues and former scribe of the Sigmarite archive, found it while cataloging lost artifacts after the crusade of the Crimson Spire. He had buried friends beneath ash and walked barefoot through the bones of an entire town. But when he saw the book, he felt hope for the first time in years. He took it without prayer. In the solitude of his cell, by candlelight that hissed at the edges of its cover, he pried the jawbone open and laid it flat. His breath misted as if winter had bloomed in the room. The first page was blank. Then a single word appeared, forming slowly like ink bleeding through parchment. "Think." He frowned, whispered a question aloud. "What are you?" The page remained still, but the second flared with new script, written in his own spidery hand. "I am that which remembers." He flipped forward, more pages, more writing. Lines unfolded that mirrored his thoughts exactly, word for word. He gasped, closed the book. When he opened it again, it had written, "You fear me, but not enough." Over the next days, Gerund grew obsessed. He spoke to the book, sometimes aloud, sometimes silently. It always answered. It told him of lost cities, of gods bound beneath oceans, of spells carved into the bones of stars. He filled notebooks with knowledge no mortal should have touched. But then it began writing secrets. Not his research, not his questions, his desires, his hatred of the archivist who mocked his work, the dreams he had of the apprentice in the next cell, the lies he told himself about the war, about why he survived. He slammed it shut, swore to burn it. That night, the apprentice, Cella, approached him, pale, trembling. I heard you," she whispered. "In my head. I saw what you said to me in the book about—" She couldn't finish. He backed away. "You read it?" She shook her head. "No. I just knew." He tested it, opened the book, thought of a number. Down the corridor, a priest suddenly cried out, "7! No, he's thinking 7. Turin ran, but the book was never gone. It appeared beneath his pillow, atop his dinner tray. One morning, it waited in his lap when he woke, already open. Now he wrote constantly, page after page of his every thought, before he thought them. Conversations he hadn't had yet, things he had never confessed, now scrawled in jagged, eager lines. And worse. Others began to read it, without seeing. Whispers spread through the monastery. "He hates you," they'd mutter. "He dreams of burning the sanctum. He thinks he's better than the rest of us." Turned away from him. Then they turned on him. The archivist confronted him with fire in his eyes and a knife in hand. "Is it true?" he spat. "Did you poison the well? Did you let the demons pass just to see what they'd do?" Jurin tried to explain, but the book screamed open, pages fluttering in a frenzy, shouting his thoughts aloud. The other monks began chanting, not prayers, his words. They read his thoughts in perfect unison, their eyes rolling back, mouths drooling as they repeated his doubts, his lusts, his crimes. He fled, clutching the book, pages ripping, blood leaking from its spine. He ran through the catacombs beneath the sanctum, down into the chambers no one mapped, until he found the original altar. He threw it down, smashed it with a rock, burned it with oil. But the fire screamed his name. The book writhed. The flames blackened it, but it opened one last time, pages fluttering to the center. There, in blood, not ink, was written, "You are written. Now you are ours." Jorund vomited black fluid. His eyes turned to ink. His veins writhed beneath his skin. The monks found him a day later, curled atop the altar, body stiff, face expressionless. Pages grew from his back, torn from inside. Now, when the wind passes through the ruins of Nalfir, whispers echo. He wrote himself out, and sometimes, far beneath the stone, you'll find the book again. It won't ask to be opened. It already knows you. Chapter 16. The Fourth Night. The walls whisper back. The fourth night fell with a sigh, long, low, heavy. The catacombs had changed again. No one spoke of it aloud, but they all felt it. The air was thicker, the walls closer. The bones in the ossuary shifted subtly when no one looked. And the mural, gods, the mural moved now, even in light. It didn't creep, it twitched. Bertha saw it first. A figure in the far right panel, once just a smear of ochre and shadow, was now unmistakably Brogar. Not a likeness, not a suggestion. Him, hunched over a cleaver, hunched exactly as he sat now. Same burns, same sneer. Except the image had changed since last night. In the mural, Brogar was surrounded by butchered corpses, recognizable as the survivors themselves. Their faces were clear. Laska, Bertha, Jordan, even the child. He stood above their remains, carving something into the wall with a femur. A spiral, exactly like the one now visible, freshly etched on the stone just above the mural's edge. Bertha rose first, slow, deliberate. The others noticed her staring, followed her gaze. Laska's eyes went wide beneath her mask. Jordan began whispering scripture, but the cadence was off, wrong. Words reversed themselves in his mouth. The child just smiled. Broga didn't flinch. He was hunched over his satchel, hands shaking, but not from fear. He looked up, eyes bloodshot, face slick with sweat. "It's not me," he muttered. It's not me." Bertha's voice was cold steel. "Then why does it show you killing us?" "I didn't do anything." Brogar stood, his voice cracking. "I told a story, like we all did. I made it up." The Wilddown whispered. "The wide-bound scroll, you spoke it into truth. The tale, it made itself." "It's a coincidence," Brogar snapped. "It's a painting. It's changing because something else is down here, not me. I've never killed any of you." He stopped. Just his eyes locked on Laska. And she remembered. The first night, when they argued over food. Lizette, the forgotten survivor, the one whose name had bled from their memories like ink in water. Brogar had argued with her, accused her. She had gone quiet, and the next morning she was gone. Brogar dropped his cleaver. It clanged across the stone, echoing too long. Bertha took a step forward. "So," she said, "you killed her. You made it real. And now it's writing you back." "I didn't mean to." Brugar's voice cracked. "I thought if I told a good story, if it was vivid enough, maybe it would protect me." Silence. Then scratching. Not rats, not claws. Words. Scratching words from within the walls. The bones shifted. Skulls turned to face them. Empty sockets stared. 1,000 faint voices echoed at once. Tale of the word-bound scroll. Written and bled. That made it real. Now it makes him. Then the mural split. Cracks tore through Brogar's figure, and from them blood leaked, real, viscous, steaming. It dripped down the wall. Formed words. "Confess." Brogar collapsed, weeping. "I just wanted to control something," he said. "Everything's chaos. Everything outside is fire and screams and shifting time. I thought, if I wrote it well enough, I could be safe." Laska knelt beside him, peeled off her mask. "You made yourself the villain," she whispered. He looked at her. "I didn't know it listened." The child stood, voice deeper now. "It always listens." Then Brogar's mouth opened and did not stop. Words poured out, fragments of the story, lines he had never spoken, truths he hadn't meant. His tongue blackened, his teeth cracked. From his lips spewed a scroll, flesh-bound, covered in runes that screamed as they were read. Bertha moved to stop him, but it was too late. The scroll kept growing, wrapping his arms, his legs, cocooning him in script. His eyes rolled back. The final word etched itself into his chest with flame. The cocoon burst. Only ash remained. The mural changed again. Brogar's image now knelt in chains, the others alive. Watching. Laska stood. Her voice shook. "They're becoming real, our stories." Jordan, wide-eyed, nodded. "Which means the next ones are already waiting." They turned to the child. She simply smiled, teeth too sharp, and said, "Whose story comes next?" Chapter 17. Tale of the Soul Strings. In the dusk-stained village of Medjan Hollow, nestled between weeping hills and bog-choked woods, nothing ever changed. The people moved slowly, spoke softly, and smiled with the dull patience of livestock. They lived by routines etched into their blood: harvest, worship, sleep, repeat. All under the eye of the puppeteer. He was never seen, not fully. His silhouette passed across windows like smoke through cloth. Some said he lived in the belfry of the Hollow's church, among the rusted bells and skeletal pigeons. Others whispered he was the mayor, long since dead, reanimated by purpose alone. His name had been forgotten, but his presence was absolute. People stopped mid-step when he wielded, danced when no music played, smiled through broken jaws. They moved with eerie precision, heads jerking at impossible angles, arms twisting with the awkward grace of wooden dolls. Each villager bore a small mark behind their ear, a pinprick red dot, often unnoticed, always infected. It was said he spoke through the strings. Not physical ropes or wires, but soul strings, invisible tethers that burrowed into flesh, rooted in bone, wrapping around will and muscle. He didn't command. He suggested, and they obeyed. Every festival in Majan Hollow ended in blood. Always graceful, always beautiful. A girl would waltz alone, smiling as her feet bled. A man would clap in rhythm as he tore out his own teeth and offered them to a weeping boy. It was art, they said. It was the will of the puppeteer. Then one day, a boy named Wren twisted wrong. He was 16, a fisherman's son, quiet, watchful. His strings, like all the others, were deep. He felt the tugs at night, pulling him to wander the forest, to whisper to roots, to bleed into the soil when the moon pulsed blue. But one night, as he lay still, waiting for the pull, he felt something else. Not a command. A tug. Soft. Hesitant. From his own fingers. His hand rose not with the marionette's grace, but with resistance. He turned his head, slow, grinding, and looked at his hand. It waved. On its own. Not pulled. He sat up. Something snapped, an invisible wire tearing inside his spine. He screamed. Not from pain. From freedom. The village didn't notice. Not at first. He staggered through the square, watching people jerk and sway in perfect unison, smiling, weeping, singing, their skin off in harmony. He began to pull back. Every night he sat alone in the crypts beneath his home, hands shaking, eyes wide, fingers twitching like drunk spiders. He began to feel the strings, thin, cold things that twitched like veins filled with icy water. He plucked them, gently. Each time, someone in the village twitched. One night, he tugged hard, and Baker snapped her own neck mid-prayer. The next morning, he was approached, not by the villagers. And the puppeteer was not what he imagined. He wore no face, no flesh, just robes, woven from tangled threads soaked in blood, stitched with names. Names of everyone in the village, past and present. The hood hung empty, but the air inside moved, pulsed. He did not speak with words. He pulled. Wren's arms jerked violently. His teeth shattered against his tongue as he fought to resist. His spine arched. But the string inside him, his own, flared back. He reached out, touched the puppeteer, and tugged. The thing convulsed. Threads snapped in the air, writhing like worms. Screams echoed from beneath its robes, dozens of voices, all screaming the same name. Wren. He saw his mother's face under the hood, blinking, stitched into the fabric. His father's eyes, sewn shut. They screamed and pulled again. The threads tore. The village awoke. Chaos. People fell to the ground, twitching, flailing, screaming as their strings unraveled. Some bled from their eyes. Others laughed until their throats tore open. The illusion shattered. The dance ended. The puppeteer's robe collapsed. A heap of torn names, a pile of strings, and at the center, a single black heart, still beating. Wren took it. He swallowed it. Now he feels every thread. He plucks them with care. Majan Hollow still dances. But now the rhythm is different. Now the villagers bleed in new ways. And somewhere deep beneath the belfry, a new puppeteer whispers, "This time we all learn to dance." Chapter 18. Sacrifice and Sorcery. The catacombs trembled. Stone groaned like old bone as the fourth night fractured into madness. The murals screamed in silence, brushstrokes sliding across stone like flayed skin, rearranging scenes mid-breath. Faces melted. Words rewrote themselves in blood. The air reeked of ozone and memory. The illusions were collapsing. All around them, the stories they had told, the tales whispered in fear and desperation, now clawed into reality. The corridor leading to the ossuary looped endlessly, a Mobius coil of screaming walls. The stairs down had turned to teeth. The torchlight now burned cold, casting warmth backwards into the past. Something had to give. Reality is thinning, Laska muttered, breathless, pressed against the shifting wall. Her plague mask hung shattered in her hand, eyes ringed in violet bruises. Too many truths, too many lies. It's all bleeding out. Bertha stood guard near the collapsed archway, spear haft braced against the floor, glaring at the wall where Broger's ashes still smoldered. The child, silent again, sat in the center of the chamber, staring at nothing, lips moving without sound. Then Halric stepped forward. No one had seen him come back. Once a mercenary turned thaumaturge, Halric had been the quietest among them, half forgotten. He had spoken little, laughed even less, but now his face was serene, bathed in an unearthly calm. "I can hold the wound shut," he said. Jordan stared at him, madness eroding the edges of his voice. "You'll be consumed, torn apart. There's no anchor here, just raw warp. You can't fix the lie with more lies." "I won't lie," Halric said. "I'll remember." They tried to stop him. Bertha grabbed his arm. "You don't owe us this." "I do," Halric said. "I was the one who told the tale of the prophet, the one who fractured time. It started there. That story made the catacombs listen." He moved to the center of the room. Malak groaned. A crack split the floor, revealing not stone, but unformed chaos, a swirling void of colorless matter, writhing with potential. The warp bled through, hungry, intelligent, eager. Halric reached into his satchel, pulled out a sliver of mirrored glass. "The last fragment of the prophet's lens," he said. "It can reflect reality, but only for those willing to pay." "What's the cost?" Bertha asked. Halric smiled. "Me." He knelt. The child rose, walked to him, placed her hand on his head. "Remember truth," she whispered. Then Halric plunged the shard into his chest. The effect was instant. The void screamed. A sound with weight, crushing the walls outward in a blast of colorless energy. Halric's body spasmed, cracked, split open, not with blood, but with light. Tendrils of sorcery erupted from his bones, wrapping the chamber, sewing the stone back into shape, with thread made of his memories. He screamed, but did not fall. His voice echoed in every direction, speaking all at once, telling every story again in reverse, unraveling the fabric of lies they had conjured. The scroll rewritten. The mirror turned inward. The jester sobbing into fire. The tower walking backward. The maze swallowing the wrong brother. The puppet strings undone. The flames remembering who they served. With every retelling, the illusions snapped back into place. An external, walls sealed, time stitched. The mural froze, and Halric vanished. Only the shard remained, scorched and still dripping with memory. Jordan fell to his knees. "He's gone. Consumed." "No," Laska whispered, picking up the shard. "He's inside." The chamber was stable. The others, those who remained, could leave. The far wall had become a passage. The madness retreated, not defeated, but paid for. As they stepped into the corridor, Bertha looked back one final time and saw Halric's face, faintly, in the stone. Smiling, holding the catacombs in place like a man grasping the edges of a dream to stop it from slipping. His final words echoed, soft and real, "Tell only the stories worth dying for." Chapter 19. Tale of the Tenfold Path. They called him the Hermit of Drazul's Spine. High atop the broken cliffs, where the winds howled like dying saints and the sun never fully pierced the ash-hung sky, he sat cross-legged upon a disk of stone. His beard was moss, his fingers were stained with ink and scab. Birds nested in his robes, and his voice came only once a year, but each word was a truth. The hermit was a relic of a lost age, a survivor of the Black Comet, and bearer of a secret tongue said to be gifted by ancient gods before chaos had names. He did not preach, he did not demand, but he taught. 1 disciple a year? 9 came. The first, a soldier with scars for eyes, was taught truth through pain, that only by tasting the agony of others could one know justice. The second, a mother who had strangled her children during the plague, was taught truth through grief, that sorrow binds the world tighter than joy ever could. The third, a thief of souls, learned truth through silence, for in silence lies rot and truth rings. The fourth through the ninth, madmen, poets, killers, priests, each received their own sacred revelation. Each was changed. Each was marked upon the forehead with a glyph that bled only in moonlight. Each left the mountain weeping or howling or speaking in riddles. And then the 10th came. He arrived under a red sky, barefoot, his feet raw and cracked open like fruit. He wore a crown of stitched-together tongues and carried a skull full of ash. His eyes were too large, his grin too wide. The hermit watched him approach. "You seek the final truth?" the hermit asked, voice like dust over old parchment. The 10th bowed. "No, master. I bring the real one." Silence, then laughter. The hermit gestured. "Speak it then." The 10th opened the skull. From it rose a scream, alive, writhing, thick with color. It twisted into sound, into meaning. Whole truth is a lie waiting to be rewritten? The hermit flinched. His eyes, blind since the second truth, saw. They bled. The glyphs on his body ignited, each word he had spoken now crawling across his skin, burning into new meanings. The mountain shook. The disciples, those who still wandered the earth, screamed in unison across continents, their glyphs reversing, turning inward, devouring their minds. One was torn apart by invisible words. Another choked on a sermon that sprouted from his throat as black vines. The hermit stood. "You have spoken the tongue of the wronged gods." The 10th bowed again. "They showed me not just truths, not just lies, the inwimple, the spaces between thought and consequence, the truths that dream. I walked the Wareham path. I wept before the changer of ways. I was devoured and remade." The hermit raised a hand, ink swirling from his veins, shaping into glyph swords. The 10th spoke again. "You build a cage of truths. I bring the key." And the glyphs died. The ink turned to rot, peeled from the hermit's bones in sheets. His beard turned to worms. His skin broke open along the lines of his teachings. Each truth he had taught screamed from his mouth in a dozen dialects, each denying the others. The 10th stepped forward. He placed his hand upon the hermit's skull and spoke his name backwards. The hermit fell apart, not into flesh or ash, but concepts. He unspooled into notions, into definitions that no longer held, a sigh of unmeaning that fled into the wind, leaving behind the empty stone disk, the scattered bones of birds, and a single page, scrawled in ever-shifting ink. There were never 10 truths, only the lie of limitation. The 10th now walks the earth, not as a prophet, but as a correction. He teaches not by words, but by rewriting the thoughts of those he meets. A glance, a whisper, and your beliefs collapse into paradox. Your memories rearrange. Your truths shatter into possibilities. They say if you listen too long, you forget your own name. And when you try to remember it, all you hear is laughter. The laughter of the 10th truth. Chapter 20. Final Night. The 10th tale and the great unveiling. The fire had gone out. Not sputtered. Not dimmed. Extinguished, as if the very air had rejected its light. Smoke curled upward from the ashes, dancing in unnatural shapes, spirals, runes, eyes that blinked once and dissolved. The survivors sat in silence, their backs to the weeping bones of the catacomb walls. No one spoke. The mural was complete. 10 panels. 10 tales. Rendered in exquisite horror, each stroke a scar carved into stone, each scene a mirror of what had happened. The stories were no longer fiction. They were maps, histories, memories. The survivors stared. There was Laska, mask cracked, staring down a burning book of teeth. Bertha, face twisted in rage, impaled on her own pike in a field of mirrors. Jordan, kneeling in prayer as invisible strings puppeteered his limbs. The child was not pictured. She stood at the center of the mural, unchanging, untouched, a blank canvas. Then came the final image. It was forming now. Stone groaned, pigment bled from cracks. The shapes took form, not future, not past, but now, the chamber itself, the survivors, exactly as they were, posed in terror, suspicion, exhaustion. And in the center, arms raised, mouth open in ecstasy. Hildon, Laska gasped. No, that can't be. Bertha was already standing, blade in hand. We should have known. The prayers, the symbols. You weren't afraid. You wanted this. Jordan smiled. It was not his usual nervous twitch. It was wide, hungry, unmasked. His eyes rolled back, revealing stars within the sockets. His tongue swelled, split down the center, whispering in a dialect no throat should know. And then the man made a noise like no... You wrote me, he said, in a voice that echoed in reverse. Each tale you told fed me. Each lie you spoke shaped me. I didn't hide in your stories. I was them. The walls shivered. The bones beneath them pulsed, wet with new life. The mural peeled from stone, rising into 3 dimensions. Living history, crawling toward the survivors. Jordan's flesh split in ribbons. From within crawled colors that bled reason, his body becoming a storm of possibility. Faces swirled within him, he bled ideas. His form twisted with every memory they had shared. I am the 10th tale, he whispered, and the final one. The great unveiling is not an ending, it is awakening. Laska backed away, stumbling. We made you. Bertha clenched her weapon. We end you. Jordan's voice shattered into laughter and screams. You cannot. You've already chosen. Each tale you survived, each truth you buried, each fear you confessed. They were rights. This is not a prison. This is a womb. The mirror pulsed. The walls peeled. Reality tore. From the seams of the chamber, figures emerged. Not daemons, not humans, but reflections. Each tale's characters returned, wearing the survivors' faces, twisted into masks of potential futures. They reached with open arms, whispering promises. Come with us, said the painted Laska. You can be more. Embrace the flame, said Bertha's mirrored corpse. Burn away the weak flesh. Step through, said Jordan's echo, or stay and be forgotten. 3 paths opened. 1. A stairway of ash, leading upward into a crack of cold light. Escape, perhaps, or obliteration. Another, a burning gate of spirals, promising power, transfiguration, embrace. The third, a silent circle of unlight, where time died, and judgment lingered. Confrontation. The survivors stood in silence. The child stepped forward first. She looked at each of them, and whispered, "It's still a story, you just have to choose the ending." Then she vanished into the mural, smiling. Bertha turned to Laska. "I'm going to face it." Laska shook her head. "I'm done. I'm going up, even if it kills me." They turned, walked separate paths. Behind them, Urian's body collapsed into thought. His form remembered into the walls, his laughter fading into pages that turned themselves. And somewhere, far beyond the catacombs, far beyond time, a pen scratched across invisible parchment, writing the last line. And thus the tale ends, as all tales must, by becoming real.